In this video, we'll see how to create a new mass family and create 3D solid forms from 2D model lines. We will also see how to host line work on reference planes and levels for accurate modelling. Massing is often the first stage of designing a new building. By creating simple shapes to represent the form of the building, the architectural designer can start to convey the visual impact of the building upon its surroundings. They can also be used to calculate areas to ensure that requirements are being met before going on to create a detailed model. I have the exercise file Create Massing open, and this file is a family file and needs to be opened using the Open Family option. This file is based on the Mass Family template, and as we're in a massing family, the ribbon interface is slightly different. On the Create tab here, we have the sketching tools on the Draw panel that will allow us to create model lines and reference planes, as well as tools for dimensions and levels. I'll swap to the Modify ribbon tab, and we can see that we have the same Draw panel with the sketching tools on this tab also, along with the Modify tools for editing and the clipboard tools too. Therefore, the Modify ribbon tab is the one we will use the most. Looking at the default 3D view here, we can see that not only do we have levels visible, but reference planes too. And this makes it easier to perform most of the modelling and editing in this 3D view. Although, looking at the project browser, we do have 2D plan views and elevations, and these are also useful for sketching and aligning objects accurately. The 3D forms are created by first drawing 2D line work that is then used to turn into 3D forms. Different combinations of 2D line work are combined to create the different types of 3D form. We'll start by creating a 2D rectangle. So from the Draw panel on the ribbon tab here, I'll select the Rectangle tool. And we can see this by default will create model lines. Looking at the view, we can see that level 1 is highlighted, as this will be the placement plane for our rectangle. Looking at the options bar here, we can see that we have the placement plane option, and it's set to level 1, although we could change this here if we needed to. Now I'll just sketch the rectangle somewhere near the centre of the view, and then I'll click Modify to finish drawing the rectangle. And if I select the rectangle, we can see that we get the chain of 4 lines that make the rectangle and not the individual lines on each side. So in order to edit one side, I'll now click on the right hand edge here, and just that single side will be selected. And now we can see we have the temporary dimensions, so I'll edit this and we'll set this to be 40 feet. Now I'll select the line on the top of the rectangle here, and we'll set this temporary dimension to be 20 feet. Now we have it adjusted to the correct size, we can move it into the correct location. So I'll reselect the rectangle, and then from the Modify Lines ribbon tab here, on the Modify panel, we'll click on the Move tool. Then we'll snap to the middle of the lower edge here, and move it to the intersection of the reference planes and snap it into place. So now we have that rectangle in the correct location. We can reselect it, and then looking at the Modify Lines ribbon tab, we can see we have a form panel here, and on here we have tools to create either a solid form or a void form. I'll click the Create Solid Form, and we can see that that rectangle has now been extruded into a 3D box. And looking a little closer, we have the 3D drag control here that we can use to adjust its height. Or equally, we have the temporary dimension here, and I'll edit this and set this to be 40 feet. So that has now created a 3D extrusion based on the 2D rectangle that we drew. Next, we want to create a solid form by lofting through 3 2D shapes. We want this to be lofted in a horizontal direction, so we will need to create some vertical reference planes to host the 2D shapes. To do this, from the project browser, I'll go to the Level 1 floor plan view, and we'll sketch in 2 reference planes. So from the Draw panel on the ribbon, we'll click the Plane tool to create reference planes. Now I'll draw vertically down just to the right of this central plane, and we'll set the temporary dimension to be 80 feet. Now we'll repeat this to the right hand side again and set the temporary dimension to 80 feet once more. And if I select the first reference plane here, we can see that it doesn't have a name yet. So we'll click on here and we'll name this one middle. And now I'll select the second plane we created and name this one right. Next we want to sketch the first shape that we're going to use for the loft, and to do this I'll open up the east elevation view. Now zooming into our existing rectangle here, I'll go to the draw panel on the ribbon here and select the rectangle tool. And just looking at the placement plane option, we can see it's set to be the center left right reference plane. I'll snap to the endpoint of the reference plane that's in the middle of the box here, and then we'll draw our rectangle up and to the right hand side. So I'll click modify to finish drawing the rectangle, and then we'll select the rectangle and then click on the right hand side here. And we have the temporary dimension, so we'll set this to be 30 feet. Now I'll select the top line and we'll adjust this temporary dimension to be 45 feet. And now I'll select the left line in the center of the reference planes here, and we'll change this temporary dimension to be 60 feet to give us the overall size of the rectangle. Now we have that created, I'll swap back to the 3D view. And we want to place copies of these rectangles onto the new reference planes that we've just created. So to do this, we'll use the copy and paste tools. So with the rectangle selected, we can see its host is currently the center left right reference plane. So we'll go to the clipboard panel and we'll click copy to clipboard. And then from the options bar, we'll change the host reference plane to be the right reference plane first. And then we'll go back to the clipboard panel here, and under the paste tool, we'll click paste aligned into same place. And this will paste that back onto the center left right reference plane. So whilst it's still selected, we'll change its host to be the middle reference plane. And then once more, we'll go back to the clipboard panel, and underneath the paste tool, we'll click align to same place to give us the three rectangles aligned to the three planes that we have got created. Now we just want to scale the middle reference plane to make it a little bit bigger. So with it selected, we'll go to the modify panel on the modify tab here and choose the scale tool. We'll select the middle of the baseline here, and then the far edge to be the reference dimension, and then we'll set this to be 45 feet, and that will have scaled the rectangle accordingly. So now that we have those three profiles created on their reference planes, I'll select all three of them, so holding down the control key to multiple select. And now from the modify lines ribbon tab on the form panel here, we'll click to create a solid form. And straight away we can see we have that 3D solid created that's been lofted through those three shapes, and if I select it here we can actually see the profile of each rectangle inside the shape. Finally, we want to create a form on the other side here, and this will be a blend between two shapes. The first shape will be hosted on level 1, and then we'll need to create a new level to host the second shape. So let's do that first. I'll select level 1, and from the modify levels ribbon here, we'll click the copy tool on the modify panel, and then we'll click level 1 for the reference and move this vertically up, and we'll type in 45 feet for the distance. Now that's created, we'll draw the first shape on level 1. I'll swap to the level 1 plan view, and then from the draw panel on the ribbon here we'll click the rectangle tool. And we'll use the guides here to align to the edge of the existing geometry for the first corner. And then once we've got that set, we'll come down and use the guide on the opposite side, and approximately 60 feet in we'll click to set that rectangle. And then I'll click modify to finish drawing it, and then reselect the rectangle. Then we'll select the left hand side and set the temporary dimension to exactly 60 feet now. So I'll swap back to the 3D view, and we can see that rectangle created on level 1 here. We'll copy it up to level 2. So with it selected, we'll go to the Modify Lines ribbon. And from the clipboard panel, we'll click Copy to Clipboard. And then under the Paste tools, we'll click Align to Picked Level. And then we just need to pick on level 2. And we can see that rectangle pasted above the original one on level 2. So with it selected now, we'll click on the left hand edge here and set the temporary dimension to be 75 feet. And now we have the two shapes that we need to create the blend for our last form. So I'll select both of them using the Control key to multiple select. And then from the Modify Lines ribbon on the Form panel here, we'll click to create a solid form. And we can see now that that's created a 3D form that effectively blends between those two rectangles that we've had selected. And that finishes creating the forms that we need for this massing.